Good day, sir. My name is Lauren Militalo from BS Mining Engineering 4, and here are the representation of the Republic Act of 8749 and Republic Act number 387, and of course Presidential Decree 1174. So first, I'm going to present the Republic Act number 8479, or also known as Downstream Oil Industry Deregulation Act of 1998. So Republic Act number 8479, also known as the Downstream Oil Industry Deregulation Act of 1998, is a law in the Philippines that aims to liberalize and deregulate the downstream oil industry. The law was enacted by the Senate House of Representatives of the Philippines and the Congress assembled on February 10, 1998. So, the significance of this republic lies in its goals and effect on the industry. The law advances a competitive showcase by permitting more players to enter the downstream oil division, cultivating reasonable estimating, guaranteeing a non-stop and adequate supply of high-quality petroleum items, and of empowering speculations in framework and innovation. So, by deregulating the industry, Republic Act 8479 points to improve competition, advance effectiveness, and give buyers with more choices and superior administrations. It will look for to pull in nearby and outside ventures, fortify financial development, and contribute to the advancement of the vitality division within the Philippines. So, the law driven to the deregulation of the oil industry in the Philippines. This implied the government would not control the estimating and importation of oil items. The act deregulates the downstream oil industry, which incorporates the importation, exportation, fabricating, promoting, and dispersion of petroleum items. And of course, the penal sanctions. Any person who violates any of the provision of the act shall suffer a penalty of 3 months to 1 year imprisonment, and a fine ranging from 50,000 pesos to 300,000 pesos. So, removal of oil prices stabilization funds rather. So, the law annulled the OPSF, which was finance utilized by the government repay oil companies for conceivable taken a toll under recovery cost due to cost controls and alterations. Promotion of free market competition. The law energizes competitions and anticipates cartels, restraining infrastructures and ruthless estimating within the oil industry. It, moreover, empowers new players to take an interest within the advertise. So, consumer protection. The law incorporates arrangements to ensure shoppers from conceivable out-of-line estimating homes by oil companies. Environmental consideration. The law promotes the use of cleaner and higher quality petroleum products to reduce environmental impact. So next is the Republic Act 387, or also known as Petroleum Act of 1949. So Republic Act number 387 rather, to known as the Petroleum Act of 1949, is a critical enactment in the Philippines. Its essential reason is to advance the investigation, improvement, misuse, and utilization of the petroleum assets within the nation. So, the law points to empower the preservation of these assets, whereas authorizing the Secretary of Agribusiness and Natural Resources to make an organization unit and a specialized board in the Bureau of Mines. So the significance of Republic Act 387 lies in its part in directing and managing the petroleum industry within the Philippines. It gives rules and directions for the investigation and extraction of petroleum assets, guaranteeing that these exercises are conducted in a dependable and feasible way. The law to makes a difference in advancing the advancement of the petroleum segment, which contributes to the country's vitality, security, and financial development. So, Republic Act 387 builds up the specialists of the Secretary of Farming and Natural Resources to make fundamental workplaces and units to supervise the usage of the law. This guarantees viable administration and administration of the petroleum assets within the Philippines. So, Republic Act number 387, moreover known as Petroleum Act of 1949, was ordered on June 18, 1949. Amid the administration of Elpidio Quirino, it was presented to control and advance the investigation, improvement, abuse, and utilization of petroleum assets in the Philippines. So, here are the enactment and early years. So, passed by the Congress of the Philippines and marked into law by the President Elpidio Quirino in 1949, aimed to draw in remote venture within the petroleum segment, which was generally unexplored at the time. Set up an administrative system for giving concessions for investigation, improvement, and generation of petroleum. So, here are the critical revisions. So, first, 1976, created by PNOC, increased government share. 1995, introduced benefit contracts, streamlined approvals, strengthened natural assurance, and current status is still fundamental framework, but modification proposed for the modernization and straightforwardness. And lastly is the reactions, complex procedures, and potential natural effect. So, here are the objectives of the RA 837. 387 rather. So, first is the advancement of investigation and improvement. The law points to energize the investigation and improvement of petroleum assets within the nations. It gives rules and controls for companies and people included in this exercise. And next is the preservation of assets. So, Republic Act 387 emphasizes the significance of moderating petroleum assets. It sets rules for responsible and economical use within the extraction and utilization of these assets. So, third, control of the petroleum industry. The law builds up the specialists of the Secretary of Agribusiness and Natural Resources to make authoritative units and specialized sheets to supervise petroleum industry. This guarantees successful administration and administration of the industry. And lastly is the financial improvement. Republic Act 387 contributes to the financial improvements of the Philippines by advancing the development of the petroleum division. The industry plays a significant part in giving vitality assets and supporting different financial exercises. So, here are the principles under the Republic Act 387. So, first is the assumption of guiltlessness. Under Philippine law, each individual denounced of a wrongdoing is assumed blameless until demonstrated blameworthy past a sensible question. It is the obligation of the arraignment to display proof that sets up the blame of the charge. So, next is the burden of verification. So, the burden of demonstrating the blame of the blamed rests with the indictment. They must display proof that persuades the court of the accused blame past a sensible question. So next is the components of a wrongdoing. To set up criminal risk, the arraignment must demonstrate the nearness of all the components of a particular wrongdoing. Each wrongdoing has a particular components that must be demonstrated, such as act and the mental state of the denounced. So, lastly, the Presidential Decree 1174, or also known as Coal Development Act of 1976. So, the Coal Improvement Program imagined in Presidential Proclaim 972, something else known as the Coal Advancement Act of 1976, energized the cooperation of the private division with satisfactory and adequate budgetary, specialized and administrative assets to embrace a work program to successfully investigate, create, and misuse innate coal assets calculated abdicate greatest advantage to the Filipino individuals and incomes to the Philippine government, and guarantee fair and reasonable returns to the taking part private ventures. In line with the approach of the government to energize and quicken investigation and improvement of innate assets, and within the light of current conditions within the coal industry, it is basic that Presidential Proclaim 972 be amended, granting extra motivations to coal administrators taking part within the coal improvement program, and arrange that coal operations ought to not be pointlessly hampered and caught by the troubles and delays in securing surface rights beneath existing laws and controls for the entry into, get to, or occupation of private lands. It is vital to provide a fair and equitable framework of rights, procurement, and utilized by coal operators, which would moreover be given incentives and protections to private landowners and tenants. So, here are the existing permittees or lease holders. So, in order to give holders of valid and subsisting coal revocable permits, coal leases, and other existing rights granted by the government for the exploration and exploitation of coal lands or the operators thereof, duly approve the appropriate government agency. Sufficient time to upgrade their financial and technical capabilities to develop a viable work program to be embodied in a coal operating contract. The deadline for entering and concluding a duly executed coal operating contract is extended from July 27, 1977 to January 27, 1978. So next is the obligations of operator and a coal operating contract. On behalf of the government, reimburse the operating for all operating expenses not exceeding 90% of the gross proceeds from the production in any year, provided that if in a year the operating expenses exceed 90% of the gross from proceeds from production, then the unrecovered expenses shall be recovered from the operation of succeeding years. Operating expenses means the total expenditures of coal operations incurred by the operator as provided in a coal operating contract. So, the additional fee. All valid and subsisting holders of coal revocable permits or coal leases and other existing rights granted by the government for the exploration and exploitation of coal lands or duly qualified operators thereof who have organized their area into a coal unit subject to conditions imposed by the Energy Development Board be granted in the coal operating contract in addition to the operator's fee provided in Section 9, a special allowance, the amount of which shall not exceed 40% of the balance of the gross income after deducting all operating expenses. So, coal operating contracts entered into with Philippine citizens or corporations except those already covered under the preceding paragraph shall be granted a special allowance, the amount of which shall not exceed 30% of the balance of the gross income after deducting all operating expenses, provided that coal operating contracts in which Philippine citizens or corporations have a minimum participating interest of 40% in the contract area may, subject to reasonable conditions imposed by the Energy Development Board, be granted a special allowance not exceeding 20% of the balance of the gross income after deducting all operating expenses. For the purpose of this section, a Philippine corporation means a corporation organized under Philippine laws at 60% of the capital of which, including the voting shares, is owned and held by citizens of the Philippines. So, minimum terms and conditions. In addition to those elsewhere provided in this decree, every coal operating contract executed in minimum terms and conditions. So, first is every operator shall be obliged to spend in direct prosecution of exploration work not less than the amounts provided for in the coal operating contract. These amounts shall not be less than the total obtained by multiplying the numbers of coal blocks covered by the contract by 1 million pesos per block annually. So, provided that if the area or a portion thereof is suitable for open pit mining as determined jointly by the operator and the Energy Development Board, the minimum expenditure requirement herein provided may be reduced up to 200,000 pesos per block annually. So, entry and use of private lands. So, coal exploration, development, and exploitation is hereby declared of the public use and benefit and which the power of eminent domain by the invoke and exercise for the entry, acquisition, and use of private lands, provided that any person, entity, or entity acquiring any portion of right on such land after the execution of a coal operating contract covering such land not be entitled to the compensation herein provided. So next is the coal operator shall not be prevented from entry into private lands for the purpose of exploring, developing and exploiting coal contract area. Upon prior written notification sent to and duly received by the surface owner of the land and occupant thereof. However, if the surface owner of the land and occupant thereof refuses to allow the coal operator's entry into the land despite his receipt of the written notification, or refuses to receive said written notification, or cannot be found, then the coal operator shall notify the Energy Development Board of such fact, and shall be attached thereto a copy of the written notification. So next is, in all cases mentioned in the preceding paragraph, the coal operator shall post a bond with the Energy Development Board and the amount to be fixed by said Energy Development Board based on the type of the land and the value of the trees, plants, and other existing improvements thereon, which shall be the basis of compensation of the surface owner of the land and or the occupant in the appropriated cases mentioned in the next succeeding paragraph. So, lastly, in the absence of an agreement between the coal operator and the surface owner of the land and or occupant, the surface owner of the land and occupant thereof shall be entitled to the following compensation. So, first, title lands for the conduct of exploration, development, and exploitation within lands covered by torrents title or the government recognized titles, the surface owner shall receive as compensation from the coal operator as 1 peso for every ton of coal extracted in his hand. However, in the event that the surface owner suffers damage to his plants, trees, crops, and other improvements on his land as a direct result of the coal operation conducted by the coal operator, the former shall be entitled to compensation for the value thereof that are damaged or destroyed. So second is the untitled lands or land with incomplete titles. For the conduct of exploration, development, and exploitation of coal within untitled lands or lands with incomplete titles, the surface owner shall receive a compensation from the coal operator at least 50 centavos for every ton of coal extracted in his land rather. So lastly is the government reserve lands. So government reserve lands for purposes other than mining shall be open to a coal operating contract by filing an application thereof with the Energy Development Board, subject always to compliance with pertinent laws, rules, and regulations covering such reserve lands, provided that the compensation due to the surface owner shall occur equally between the supervising agency and of the Energy Development Board to be disbursed for conservation measures. So, the timber rights. Any provision of law to the contrary, notwithstanding the operator may cut trees or timber within his coal contract area, to applicable law and to the rules and regulation of the Bureau of Forest Development as may be necessary for the exploration, development, and exploitation of his coal contract area, provided that if the lands covered in the coal contract area are already covered by existing timber concessions, the amount of timber needed and manner of cutting and removal thereof shall be subjected to the same rules and agreed upon by the operator and timber concessionaire. So, water rights. A coal operator shall also enjoy water rights necessary for the exploration, development, and exploitation of his coal contract area upon application filed with the Director of the Bureau of Public Works in accordance with the existing laws of water and the rules and regulations promulgated thereunder, provided that water rights already granted or legally existing shall not thereby be impaired, provided further that the government reserves the right to regulate water rights and reasonable and equitable distribution of water supply so as to prevent the monopoly of the water use thereof. So, applicability of certain provision of Presidential Decree 463. So, the provisions of Chapter 14 or penal provision of Presidential Decree number 463, otherwise known as the Mineral Resources Decree of 1974, shall be applicable to the coal operations, provided that any reference therein to the decree and to the Bureau Director of Mines shall mean Presidential Decree 972 and the Energy Development Board, respectively. So, separability clause. Should any provision of this decree be held unconstitutional, no other provision thereof shall be affected thereby. Repealing clause. So, all laws, decrees, executive orders, administrative orders, rules and regulations, or parts thereof in conflict or inconsistent with any provision of this decree are thereby repealed, revoked, modified, or amended accordingly. And of course, lastly is the effectivity. So this decree shall take effect immediately. So that's all. Thank you and God bless.